Another review, and today we're going to talk about and review the 1992 TV cop film Nails, starring Dennis Hopper. This review was requested by Meteor Limeade. Thank you, Meteor Limeade, for the request. And the plot is pretty straightforward. Basically, in the beginning of the film, there's this setup, a deadly setup that kills the partner of our main character, this detective cop, Harry Niles, who also goes by the nickname of Nails. And like I said, his partner is killed in the beginning in a setup. And basically from there, the main character dives into the LA criminal underworld, driven by revenge and determined to track down those who are responsible. And that's pretty much the plot here to the film. But when you talk about performances here, Dennis Hopper, I liked him as the lead character. This is a different type of role for Dennis Hopper. It's interesting because you really didn't get to see Dennis Hopper play this type of character. I mean, just a year later, he would be the villain Koopa in Super Mario Brothers. In '94, he would be the villain in Speed. And then a year after that, he would be the villain in Waterworld. So, around this time period, he was really known for playing antagonists. It wasn't too often where you got to see him play, like a character like this, or, like even in Hoosiers, which is a good movie. But in this film, his character, he's very unhinged. He's driven by lust because he's a sex addict. So that's quite a combination. And he definitely brings an intense energy to the film. Even if because it is a TV movie, and that's one thing that I think hurts it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Because it's the same director that did Out for Justice, just a year before. And Dennis Hopper, like I said, he's good in the film. He brings an energy to the role, intensity, that Dennis Hopper intensity. And apparently, he, trained in karate for the role and, weightlifting. He wanted to get in shape for this part. But I think that one of the things that really holds this movie back is being a TV movie. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that here. Now, the supporting cast here, the captain in the film, I recognize the actor played by Jay Acavone. And I vaguely remember him from Stargate series. His partner in the film, Dennis Hopper's old partner and friend, is played by Thomas Millian. And throughout the movie, Dennis Hopper is trying to, get him back in the force and help him out, But I thought the character was just very uninteresting and dull. I thought he had no chemistry with Dennis Hopper, and he might be good in other films, in other projects and movies. But I thought his character was just very uninteresting here. You have John Hawkes as a drug dealer in the film. He has one little scene with Dennis Hopper, and it's weird, John Hawkes, you've seen this guy before. He was in The Perfect Storm. He was in Blue Streak. He had a bit part in the beginning. I want to say he was in the film Everest. And if you look this guy up, you've seen this guy before in other movies. For some reason or another, his character in the film uses a very strange and scratchy voice. And it just comes off unintentionally funny. I don't know why. We know what John Hawkes, sounds like, but for some reason he's using a voice here. Keith David plays a villain in the film, kind of a sleazy character, but he's not given much to do. Very underused. Which is disappointing because you have Keith David in the movie. I like the dynamic between, Dennis Hopper and Keith David. They only had one or two scenes, and that's pretty much it. Again, they didn't really flesh out on Keith David. Very little development. And again, it's a shame. You have Dennis Hopper and Keith David in a couple of scenes, and they don't really give him much to do. Again, I love Keith David. It's a shame. You have Cliff DeYoung. He's in the film as like a politician type character. Charles Allahan from John Carpenter's The Thing. He's in here for a little bit. Then you come to find out later that he's involved with the villains. So you have some recognizable people in the cast, but again, Keith David is not utilized properly. But yeah, I mean, so you got some recognizable faces in here. Now, when you talk about scenes and moments in the film, there's a bar scene early on where, Dennis Hopper's trying to get answers, and Danny Trejo is there as the bartender. And it's a fun little scene. I think it's like a 2-minute scene, but I thought it was fun. But the craziest moment will come later, where basically Dennis Hopper is at home taking a shower, and he's ambushed in the shower. This guy sneaks in with a shotgun. He fires the shotgun at Dennis Hopper in the shower, but he just hits the curtains. And then Dennis Hopper decides to chase after the attacker completely naked into the street while firing his gun. Yeah, that did happen in this movie. And it just showcases the insanity and just how unhinged our lead character is. And then later on, you have a scene in a restaurant where he confronts a character that, is involved, and he has a line where he says, "You can't reason with me. I'm crazy. I'm a pissed off white cop without a badge." And that made me laugh. So you have a couple of just insane moments with our lead character. As far as like the action and the gunplay is concerned, the gunplay is mostly forgettable. Again, being a TV movie, there's not a lot of impact there in terms of the action. It's just like one or two minor shootouts. So you're not going to get a whole lot of action here, throughout the movie. And like I said, it was directed by, John Flynn, the guy who just a year before directed Out for Justice. He directed Lock Up with Stallone. He also directed Rolling Thunder, which I've heard about but haven't seen. And the direction feels restrained. I mean, when you compare it to, Out for Justice and Lock Up. And, and one of the writers, I think the writer for the movie is one of the co-writers for Highlander and The Hunt for Red October. And you would think with that combination, you would expect a little bit more from this combination. And, despite having a solid director and a writer that has worked on Highlander and The Hunt for Red October, it just feels creatively handcuffed, because you have Dennis Hopper, playing a different role, a character that is completely unhinged, driven by revenge. He's driven by lust. All he wants is sex, revenge. I call him Horn Dog Hopper in this movie. He is Horn Dog Hopper. And, again, but Dennis Hopper makes it work because he has that intensity. He has that energy and chaotic aura, with him, no matter the role. And yeah, I mean, again, you have a good director here, you have a good writer, and you just don't really get that. Again, it feels restrained, being a TV movie. But again, I mentioned a couple of things here, that I liked about the movie. But with that being said, let me get to my overall thoughts on Nails. And overall, I would say about the film, Dennis Hopper's unhinged performance is entertaining, but its made-for-TV limitations hold it back. And it's a lesser effort from the director who brought us Out for Justice the year before. Those are my final thoughts on the film. And if I were to rate the film on a scale to 1 to 10, then for me, I'm going to give this a 5. I think it's right in the middle for me, where I don't hate the film, but I don't love the film. Again, you can see the limitations of the production, of the execution, the direction here. And Hopper's trying, but it's just not enough for me to, really like the movie. Or, I think, well, Hopper's, again, good, but there's other stuff here that I just, didn't really fully execute. But that's it for my review of Nails. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Meteor Limeade for the request, and have a good day.